Chapter 491. The Supreme Sword 5. Korork. The great strength king writhed in pain, his leg severed. The golden nine-tailed fox was genuinely amazed at this sight. Among the 6 demons, the great strength king Ox Demon King possessed the strongest power and physical body. Although he had been sealed for a long time, even she, who had gained almost the same level of demonic energy over the years, could barely wound his body only when he was off guard. How could Mok Jiongun, a human, cut off his leg? Go. The aura flowing from Mok Jiongun now was surpassing even herself, one of the 6 demons. It's hard to believe even as I'm seeing it. It said that humans were shaped as imperfect imitations of gods. There shouldn't be a vessel more imperfect and limited than humans, so how could he exert such power? Thud thud. As Mok Jiongun approached Mok Gon, who had become one with the great strength king and was writhing in pain from his severed leg, he spoke. If you're the will that needs to control the 6 demons, I suppose you're the main body, right? Korork. You're being quite dramatic for this being just the beginning. You bastard. Was Mok Jiongun's sarcastic remark a provocation? Mok Gon, who had become one with the great strength king and was in pain, couldn't contain his fury and swung his hand covered in lava towards Mok Jiongun. Mok Jiongun's gaze was expressionless as he looked up at the giant hand filled with red and black heat. Woong 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 woong. The evil sword, evil commandment sword, stained black with demonic energy, resonated. At that moment, Mok Jiongun's body soared as he swung his sword upward, and surprisingly, the great strength king's enormous hand was deflected upwards. Clang. The eyes of those watching this scene widened. If he had blocked it with a formless sword that could be called the extreme of swordsmanship, they might have understood, but to block a giant hand covered in lava with just one sword? It was a scene that defied common sense, both in terms of weight and the energy flowing out. What the hell is this guy? Mok Gon, who had become one with the great strength king, was equally surprised. No matter how quickly he was getting stronger, even if he was an incarnation, he thought it would be absolutely impossible to reach the realm of the 6 demons. But the power contained in the sword was beyond imagination. Should he call it heaviness? Despite being no larger than a dot on his palm, the moment the sword touched his hand, he felt pain as if he had been struck by a hammer larger than his palm. In that instant, Mok Gon's 3 eyes, flowing with red light, wavered. Could it be? Along with a strong sense of humiliation, anger surged. Although it was a leg without any defense, he had cut off the leg of the great strength king, who was called the strongest among the 6 demons in terms of strength and physical body. Even though he had covered his palm with lava, that sword of his might have inflicted a wound in some way. Did he deliberately not cut? To show him the difference in class? If that was the case, it was truly nothing but humiliating. How many long years had he spent trying to obtain the great strength king? Having seen countless beings, he was certain that once he obtained this body, there would be no more beings to fear. Even if it was the golden heavenly king, his creator. But why? Why is this happening? How could it be possible that the incarnation who had lost the core that could be called the source of power for the demon clan and became human, losing all his power, was surpassing his own strength? If he had trained for thousands of years, no, even hundreds of years, it would be understandable. It hasn't even been 20 years since he became human. Is it not a matter of the vessel? Gur. Gur. The blood vessels around Mok Gon's eyes on the great strength king's forehead bulged and protruded. He had thought that since he originally didn't have his own physical body to be a source, everything stemmed from the capacity of the physical body that became the vessel. That's why he had been so focused on obtaining the best physical body. But is it not the physical body? Is that not it? For a moment, Mok Gon fell into confusion. And that brought him a fatal opening. Crack. Mok Gon's 3rd eye began to protrude from the great strength king's forehead. Oh no. The panicked Mok Gon tried to burrow back into the forehead. However, once the eyeball had popped out, it couldn't easily burrow back into the great strength king's flesh, and instead the blood vessels that had been attached were gradually breaking off. Pop. Pop. No. I can't control it. There was something he had overlooked. Although he had changed bodies countless times until now, most of them were humans or beasts. The times he had become one with evil spirits were few and far between, and even those mostly failed due to being in an incomplete state. That's why he had sought to obtain the forbidden technique of the wicked granny. Although evil spirits were said to be different from the human soul structure, he had succeeded in becoming one by replacing that role with the forbidden technique. But this body he had occupied was not an ordinary evil spirit. Born from the distortion of the earth, it was a being infinitely close to a divine beast that had existed since ancient times. No matter how weakened its mind had become due to the seal, it was impossible for such a being to be completely swallowed up by Mokgon's will. No. Nu. Korork. Rip. With a roar, the blood vessels attached to the Great Strength King's forehead were completely torn off. The forcibly protruded eyeball reflected someone's figure. That figure was Mok Jiongun. Damn it. Go. Mok Jiongun was about to swing his sword in a straight line towards this eyeball. Looking at the eye filled with fear as it sensed its impending death, Mok Jiongun momentarily recalled his deceased grandfather. This is entirely for you. Although he initially said it was for the incarnation, later he truly raised him like his own child. Thanks to that warmth, he was able to establish the foundation of his emotions. He was angry for him and now sought revenge for him. Swoosh. It was at that moment when Mok Jiongun's sword was about to cut Mokgon's eyeball. Flinch. Boom. Mok Jiongun's body, about to swing the sword, fell straight down due to an enormous pressure. It wasn't just Mok Jiongun. Whoosh. Mokgon's eyeball also fell downwards due to the pressure, and the Great Strength King's head plummeted towards the ground. Boom. As the Great Strength King's head, no, his entire body fell to the ground, fragments of the destroyed earth and dust erupted in all directions with a thunderous sound. Korork. Boom 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 boom. The Great Strength King roared and tried to raise his body, but it was futile. Every time he tried to rise, he only burrowed deeper into the ground due to the tremendous gravity, and gradually his robust body was being crushed by the pressure. The Great Strength King wasn't the only one experiencing this phenomenon. Mok Jiongun's body continued to burrow into the ground. Amazing! Having regained all his memories, Mok Jiongun realized where this power was originating from. Above the ground, where gravity continued to increase, there was a being fluttering golden wings. It was the Golden Heavenly King. The ornate sword held by the Golden Heavenly King was emitting a bright radiance, and the surrounding space was gradually rippling. Woong 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 woong. From within the rippling space, the Golden Heavenly King spoke with a voice filled with ecstasy. Yes. That's right. There's no way you could have completely lost your power. Demon King. He was certain that Mok Jiongun's demonic energy was the power of the demon clan. That's why he believed he could draw out this much power with a body no different from that of an insignificant insect. Now that I know you've regained this much power, even if it's not your prime, this is no longer a game. I'll crush you to death with gravity right here. Woong 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 woong. As more radiance flowed from the sword, the surrounding space became even more distorted. The rumbling sound from the ground gradually diminished. At this, the corners of the Golden Heavenly King's mouth turned upward. Having lost your divine weapons to a former limb, you can never be a match for me. If the Heavenly King had the 5 great divine artifacts, the Demon King had 7 divine weapons. Among them, the armor could withstand even supernatural abilities, so gravity wouldn't directly affect it. But now the situation was different. He could crush and kill him with gravity like this. Boom. Someone flew up into the sky, breaking through the ground about 50 jang away. It was Mok Jiongun. Ho. He used a clever trick. Did he escape the range of gravity? The Golden Heavenly King, having located Mok Jiongun's position, swung the sword of Aiden towards him. Swoosh. Then, woong 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 woong. The space where Mok Jiongun was rippled and whoosh. Mok Jiongun's body soared straight upwards. The gravity had completely reversed. At this, Mok Jiongun kicked off the air in the opposite direction while executing the Thousand-Gene Hammer technique and stretched his index finger towards the Golden Heavenly King. Then, woong 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 woong. At that moment, the space around the Golden Heavenly King seemed to compress, converging into a single point as if his body was being sucked into the center. This was the 8 thought-shattering techniques' void suppression technique. It was a method that instantly compressed a space of about 4 jang in the desired direction. Humph. At this, the Golden Heavenly King didn't panic at all and raised the sword of Aiden upwards. Woong 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 woong. As radiance flowed from the sword, the space that was about to be compressed by the marvelous principle of the 8 formulas was forcibly expanded by gravity. Don't tell me you can manipulate gravity. Clang. At that moment, Mok Jiongun's sword, having closed the distance in an instant, clashed with the sword of Aiden. As the swords collided, an enormous boom echoed and a storm-like wind pressure swept through, causing the entire space to ripple and shake. The Golden Heavenly King's gaze became quite serious as their swords met. This sword, what is it? This was because the Sword of Aiden itself was a gravity field, so no ordinary sword should be able to withstand it, yet this black-stained sword was holding its ground. Although he could sense a demonic nature from the sword, it was only at an ordinary level. And the power he had thought was similar to the energy of the demon clan, he realized upon clashing that it was clearly different. Does that mean this power is pure capability? What the hell have you done? The Golden Heavenly King was genuinely puzzled. He had lost his core and become human, and even those proud divine weapons were gone. So what was this power? Then the Golden Heavenly King's eyes met Mok Jaeongun's. Flinch. They say a strong will is directly conveyed. In Mok Jaeongun's eyes, there was only murderous intent to cut him down. It was so persistent and intense that for a moment, the Golden Heavenly King felt a chill run down his spine for the first time. Could it be? To him, Mok Jaeongun spoke in a low voice. So you were the root of all evil? Chapter 492, The Supreme Sword 6. Boom 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 boom. The six-demon Great Strength King continued to be driven into the ground by gravity. The strength with which he tried to escape and the ever-increasing gravity caused even his robust body to begin to crumple. Korork. It was at that moment when he was about to face the worst crisis due to the crushing force. The gravity suddenly disappeared. As the pressure from the gravity vanished, the Great Strength King's body, which had been crumpling and bleeding from various places, began to recover at a rapid pace. The recovery wasn't limited to his physical body. Crack. Cracks appeared on the red jade staff that had fallen not far away. As the cracks widened, the red light gradually faded, and the red glow in the Great Strength King's eyes slowly changed to a vermilion hue. Whoosh. Along with the changing glow, various memories flashed through the Great Strength King's mind like a kaleidoscope. As these filled his mind, the Great Strength King's eyes blazed like flames. How dare you? To think that something so insignificant would burrow into his mind, weakened from being sealed. Since ancient times he had fought numerous formidable opponents, including the three Pure Ones immortals, renowned sages, the stone monkey born from a jade stone concentrating the energy of heaven and earth, and the nine-tailed fox that toyed with the world. But this was the first time he had experienced such humiliation. A mere parasitic evil spirit that can only survive by borrowing the body of another being dares to toy with me, the great sage. It was unforgivable. The fact that such an insignificant being tried to control him made the Great Strength King's anger rise to the top of his head. Boom. The Great Strength King stretched his hand upwards and pulled at the ground. As his massive body soared upwards, the Great Strength King's body began to shrink gradually. His shrinking body changed to almost human size. Whoosh. While it seemed to become completely human in form, his head remained no different from when he was gigantic. It still retained the shape of an ox. The only difference was that he was now wearing imperial robes that an emperor might wear, giving him an air of majesty, and his robust appearance exuded an incredible pressure. If there was a flaw in this robustness, it was that one of his horns had been cut off and his eye was also damaged. Damn it! The Great Strength King's expression twisted terribly as he touched his unrecovered cut horn and eye. Although it was thanks to being controlled by that mock-gone fellow, it was extremely unpleasant. Was it that fox bitch who did this to his horn and eye? The fox's ominous demonic energy was hindering the recovery of his body. He wondered how many countries she had destroyed and how much human fear and terror she had absorbed during his sealed state to increase her demonic energy to this extent. In terms of demonic energy alone, she had even surpassed his prime self. This is infuriating. It's not even that stone monkey anymore. Now even a fox dares to challenge his dominance? Now that he's freed from the seal, he might as well clear them all out. First it's that guy. The one who occupied his body. Flinch. At that moment, the Great Strength King furrowed his brow. What is this? These tremendous energies felt from above? Whoosh. When he was buried deep underground due to gravity, he didn't notice, but as he rose higher he could clearly sense extraordinary energies beyond imagination. One felt alien, as if it didn't belong to this world, and the other was even more peculiar. As the Great Strength King reached the surface, his eyes caught two beings floating in the air. What are those? Throb. At that moment, Memories of being controlled flashed through the Great Strength King's mind. As he recalled these memories, the Great Strength King's gaze became serious. What on earth are those things? Although they had human forms, both of them were emitting an immeasurable aura as if they had returned to ancient times. Instinctively, the Great Strength King felt that those two were extremely dangerous. I shouldn't deal with that parasitic eye first. Those were more dangerous. It would be difficult enough to face one of them, but if both were to join forces, it would be quite troublesome. Swoosh. As the Great Strength King extended his hand, something emerged from his ear. Whoosh. Then it instantly grew larger, transforming into a huge fan in the shape of a plantain leaf with gold and red patterns. Tap. Spirit Demon Great Treasure Plantain Leaf Fan. Among the ancient spirit beasts that were infinitely close to the realm of divine beasts, there were a few who had reached the level of demon immortals and possessed divine artifacts called great treasures. One of them was the Great Strength King himself, and this spirit demon great treasure amplified his demonic energy and possessed divine power to control storms and lava. This is the only chance. If he could seize the moment when those two were preoccupied with confronting each other, he might be able to annihilate them with the lava great storm created by the plantain leaf fan. Just as the Great Strength King was about to raise his demonic energy in the plantain leaf fan. Hey cow. What? The Great Strength King instinctively turned his head at the familiar voice. At that very moment, a dazzling five-colored light struck his one remaining eye, and as he furrowed his brow, his body rapidly began to stiffen. This is... The Great Strength King couldn't hide his bewilderment. His body was gradually stiffening due to petrification. Thanks to his ancient memories, he could instantly recognize what was causing this. Spirit Demon Great Treasure Fox Spirit Bead. Whoosh. The Great Strength King hurriedly tried to turn his body and swing the plantain leaf fan towards the five-colored light. However, due to the tremendous demonic energy emitted from the five-colored light, the petrification accelerated, and in an instant 80% of his body, except for his head, turned to stone. Crack 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 crack. You damn fox bitch. Cool your head for another few thousand years. You think you can do this to me, the heaven-leveling great sage Ox Demon King? Crack 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 crack. Before he could finish his words, the Great Strength King completely turned to stone. As the five-colored light gradually diminished, a golden-haired beauty of unparalleled looks appeared, holding a dazzling bead the size of a fist in both hands. She was the hundred-faced King Golden Nine-Tailed Fox. Ha! Ha! The Golden Nine-Tailed Fox, exhaling rough breaths from exhaustion, approached the petrified Great Strength King and placed the bead against his forehead. Click. Rumble rumble rumble. The bead burrowed into the Great Strength King's forehead and became embedded there. The completely embedded bead no longer shone and changed its texture to that of a rough stone. Looking at this, the Golden Nine-Tailed Fox clicked her tongue. This doesn't seem profitable at all. She didn't expect to use the fox bead containing demonic energy accumulated over thousands of years to seal the Great Strength King. If her demonic energy hadn't been superior to the Great Strength King's due to his seal, even this would have been difficult. The loss is not small. It will take that much time to generate a new fox bead. Tap tap. The Golden Nine-Tailed Fox lightly tapped the petrified Great Strength King with her finger, her lips twitching. Her finger touching the stone was rippling with purple poison energy. The fox bead is a symbol of transformation. Originally used for self-protection, it gains petrification and poison energy. That's why something turned to stone by a fox bead is also called a killing stone. A killing stone created with this level of demonic energy would be untouchable by anyone for thousands of years. Thud. Having exhausted all her demonic energy, she slumped to the ground. Then looking up at Mok Jiongun and the Golden Heavenly King floating in the sky, she muttered. I've done all I can. It's up to you now, Heavenly Demon. So you were the root of all evil? A chilling intent emanating from strong killing intent. It was an emotion that couldn't be felt from the past Demon King. This was clearly anger. The being who had been full of emptiness throughout their countless years of confrontation was now showing intense hostility. The corners of the Golden Heavenly King's mouth, who had felt a chill down his spine from Mok Jiongun's anger filled with killing intent directed at him, slowly began to spread. Grin. And his mouth split open wide enough to reach his ears. With an expression that was nothing short of chilling, the Golden Heavenly King, his face filled with ecstasy, said to Mok Jiongun. You've only realized it now? Whoosh. At those words from the Golden Heavenly King, Mok Jeongun's killing intent grew explosively. The Golden Heavenly King didn't hide his joy at this sight. He didn't stop there but provoked further. It's truly delightful to see you who once had your toes stepped on by a subordinate because of a mere human woman, fall to the human realm, become human yourself while trembling in fear trying to escape my gaze. Clang. At that moment, the sword that had been pressed against each other was deflected by the tremendous power that surged along with the killing intent. Mok Jeongun, who had deflected the sword of Aiden, stabbed at his chest. The evil sword, evil commandment sword piercing through his chest. However, stab. The blade of the evil sword, evil commandment sword protruded from none other than Mok Jeongun's back. As if he had suffered a penetrating wound, the clothes around Mok Jeongun's chest were stained with red blood. Blood even flowed from the corners of his mouth. Seeing Mok Jeongun in this state, the Golden Heavenly King raised the corner of his mouth in a sneer and mocked. "Ah, I suppose you couldn't see it because I was wearing the holy garment." With those words, the Golden Heavenly King tore off the upper garment he was wearing. This revealed a sacred-looking silver armor with intricate patterns engraved on the chest. The surface of the armor was so smooth that it reflected everything around it. To this, Mok Jeongun opened his mouth slightly. Mirror surface. Ho. Even as a human you haven't forgotten. The other name of this armor of Aiden. Each of the 5 divine artifacts of Aiden possessed by the Golden Heavenly King had its own divine power. Among them, the armor of Aiden was also called the mirror surface armor, and it had the divine power to completely reflect all attacks back to the opponent. Grab. The Golden Heavenly King grabbed Mok Jeongun's shoulder and said, "How foolish. Why did you become human? Your face is already turning pale just from having your chest pierced. How stupid to willingly choose such a weak body that even struggles to breathe. Truly foolish." Crunch. As the Golden Heavenly King's grip gradually tightened, his fingers dug into Mok Jeongun's shoulder. "Wouldn't it have been better to stay hidden? To think you could oppose me with just power derived from will alone, without your core or divine artifacts." Tap. At that moment, Mok Jeongun's palm touched the Golden Heavenly King's armor. Seeing this, the Golden Heavenly King sneered. "What do you think you can do? Spitting towards the sky will only dirty your own face. You." Before those words could finish. Boom. Kook. The Golden Heavenly King's chest bent backwards and blood spurted from his mouth. The Golden Heavenly King's eyes filled with incomprehension at the strange pain penetrating his body. To him, Mok Jeongun spoke in a low voice. "Penetrating force." "What? Penetrating force?" "It's a type of force emission that directly raises force inside rather than on the surface." Because of this, the Golden Heavenly King couldn't help but be bewildered by the force that had penetrated the mirror surface. "The armor doesn't work?" Swoosh. At that moment, as Mok Jeongun reached out his hand again, the Golden Heavenly King tried to create distance by flapping his wings. Although he didn't know exactly what technique it was, if the mirror surface, the divine power of the armor, didn't work, he had to avoid direct contact. But something huge blocked his path behind him. It was Woong 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 Woong. A massive formless sword about 30 jang long. This is. But there wasn't just one formless sword. Suddenly, enormous formless swords appeared in every direction the Golden Heavenly King looked, creating a wall as if to surround him and prevent his escape. Chapter 493. The Supreme Sword 7. Suddenly, enormous formless swords appeared in every direction the Golden Heavenly King looked, creating a wall as if to surround him and prevent his escape. This majestic sight was enough to draw exclamations even from the martial artists fighting the remaining evil spirits in the distance. A wall made of formless swords called the Sword Extreme. It was truly the realm of a martial god. However, the Golden Heavenly King, trapped within the wall of formless swords, sneered at this sight. "You think you can contain me with just this? With my divine artifacts alone? Use them all you want. What? It will all be futile struggling." Whoosh. With those words, Mok Jeongun's form instantly burrowed to the front. Having closed the distance in an instant, Mok Jeongun tried to plant a fist into the Golden Heavenly King's jaw. However, at that moment, swish. The Golden Heavenly King's form scattered and swish 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 swish. The number began to increase. This wasn't afterimages left by moving quickly, but truly about 100 clones appearing in an instant. The 100 or so golden heavenly kings opened their mouths simultaneously. You who have fought me for so long should know well that the mirror surface doesn't simply reflect. Whoosh. As soon as those words ended, the 100 or so clones surrounding Mok Jung-un simultaneously swung their swords of Aiden. Rumble, rumble, rumble. At that moment, the space where Mok Jung-un was distorted, and a black sphere the size of a dot appeared. The space itself had distorted as gravity concentrated in one place, and the gravitational pull was beyond imagination. Whoosh. Gravity is also a kind of weight. Due to the tremendous gravitational pull, Mok Jung-un's body was about to be sucked into the black sphere as if it were a piece of paper. At that moment, Mok Jung-un stretched his finger towards the dot. Void suppression. At that instant, the surrounding space seemed to compress, converging into a single point, conflicting with the black dot created by the golden heavenly king, and the intersecting space tore apart. Crack, 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 crack. Whoosh. Not missing this gap, Mok Jung-un repeatedly kicked the air. Then wind rose from the tips of Mok Jung-un's feet, his form quickly vibrated and then began to multiply. Swish, swish, swish. This guy. The golden heavenly king's eyes narrowed. Mok Jung-un's forms multiplied as whirlwinds swept through. As if he were using the mirror surface ability of the armor of Aiden to increase his clones, they suddenly increased to several dozen. Seeing this increased number, the eyes of Dam Bekha of the Nine Blood cult, who was watching from afar, widened. Is that the Wind Shadow 8 forms? The Wind Shadow 8 forms was a secret technique of the Jin clan. It was a supreme martial art that created up to 8 clones using the Wind Shadow step, the world's best lightness technique, to simultaneously unleash 8 different martial arts. But now Mok Jung-un had broken through the limits of the Wind Shadow 8 forms and created even more clones. Just how fast was he moving? Whoosh, 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 whoosh. It must be at a speed difficult to discern with the naked eye. The multiplied forms of Mok Jung-un simultaneously rushed towards the clones of the golden heavenly king in front of each of them. How interesting. To create clones without relying on the power of divine artifacts. But, woong 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 woong. The 100 or so golden heavenly kings simultaneously gripped their swords of Aiden in reverse and drew up divine power. Then as pure white radiance flowed out. Whoosh. Mok Jung-un's clones flying towards the golden heavenly king were thrown up, down, and sideways against their will due to the gravitational anomaly. And the clones that were thrown away became blurry and disappeared. Hastily created clones won't work. Swoosh. The golden heavenly king, who was about to mock the clones disappearing so easily, hurriedly swung the sword of Aiden. This was because formless swords were flying towards him from where the clones had disappeared due to the gravitational anomaly. The clones were simply a distraction. Woong 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 woong. What? Gravity doesn't work. He tried once again to change gravity to blow away the formless swords. But the formless swords didn't stop, instead flying towards them. There was one thing he didn't know here. Formless swords are aggregates of sharp energy with no mass, only sharpness exists. It was impossible for them to be affected by gravity. Swoosh. Therefore, the formless swords passed through the gravity field effortlessly and reached the clones of the golden heavenly king. But at that moment, grin. The corners of the golden heavenly king's mouth turned up ominously. Do you know what it means to have a form even if it has no weight? Woong 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 woong. Slash. The formless swords seemed to burrow into the armor, but they didn't destroy it. They were burrowing into the mirror surface, the divine power of the armor. As they were sucked into the mirror surface, the golden heavenly king turned towards where another clone was. Then, slash. The sword reflected by the mirror surface flew towards another clone, woong woong, and passed through the mirror surface again. But in this process, each time it passed through the mirror surface, it gained speed as gravity was added by the sword of Aiden. Whoosh. Mok Jung-un swung his sword intent to erase the formless swords, but at the point they passed through the mirror surface, they were no longer the formless swords he had unleashed. The formless swords that had escaped control continued to pass through the armor worn by the golden heavenly king's clones, being reflected and accelerating. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Before long, the formless swords had changed to a speed close to light. It was difficult for the human eye to discern, and the surroundings were being filled with streams of light. Ha, ha. That's insane. Yu Wujin of the Yu clan, watching this confrontation from afar covered in wounds, clicked his tongue at this sight. Mok Jiangun, whom he saw again, had become even more of a monster, but that was truly a being humans couldn't handle. How could one possibly block that? It seemed impossible even if the entire Yu clan combined their strength. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Over 100 formless swords had become streams of light themselves through the mirror surface and gravity. Can you handle acceleration that surpasses even reflexes? The Golden Heavenly King turned his body towards Mok Jiangun with a meaningful cry. Bam! At that moment, over 100 streams of light flew towards Mok Jiangun in an instant. The formless swords, moving at an invisible speed, even crossing space, seemed about to penetrate Mok Jiangun's body. But in that fleeting moment, woong 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 woong. The tip of Mok Jiangun's evil sword, evil commandment sword, stained with black demonic energy, rippled in the form of a huge wave, and the formless swords that had become streams of light didn't pass through the wave but rippled and rotated fiercely. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. What on earth is this? It was a technique of the scripture of transferring true qi, which could be called the highest realm of grafting techniques. Originally, it was a supreme technique that added one's own power to the opponent's attack, but here Mok Jiangun demonstrated a skill that would astonish even grand masters. Ghost Blade Force Energy Transfer True Force Formless Penetrating Sword. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The streams of light from the formless swords that had been rotating fiercely, caught in the marvelous principle of the energy transfer True Force, soon absorbed Mok Jiangun's demonic energy and became black streams of light rushing towards the 100 or so clones. Oh no! The Golden Heavenly King hurriedly exerted the divine power of the mirror surface at the tremendous speed. But the moment the black streams of light touched, tremble, tremble, tremble. Their tips trembled, and due to the marvelous principle of the penetrating force that transmitted power, the black streams of light pierced straight through the mirror surface. Stab, 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 stab. Black streams of light piercing through the chests of the 100 Golden Heavenly Kings and cutting through the air. Kook, kook, kook. The death cries of the Golden Heavenly King's clones. The mouths of the supreme experts watching this amazing sight fell open. They had thought Mok Jiangun was in the worst crisis when the Golden Heavenly King's clones accelerated the formless swords into streams of light. But this was beyond imagination. No, it was thrilling. Even one marvelous principle alone would be a supreme technique, but to combine them all in a moment when his life was on the line. A monster? No, even that's not enough. That is the god of martial arts itself. There were even those who shed tears. Although it was barely visible to the naked eye, just seeing these incredible marvelous principles flashing for a moment was overwhelming. At some point, regardless of whether they were righteous or evil, everyone was filled with awe. That's how much Mok Jiangun was demonstrating the pinnacle of martial arts that seemed to reach the heavens. Whoosh! The penetrated clones burst into flames and scattered into ash in an instant. Among the ashes, the only real body barely avoided the black streams of light, but his eyes were tinged with bewilderment. That just now was the strongest attack, combined with the acceleration of gravity, the divine power of the mirror surface, and even his own divine power. Even during the God-Demon War, it was difficult to demonstrate an attack of this level of power, so what on earth was this guy? How could he display such incredible skills with just a human body? These were powers close to miracles without divine artifacts. Whoosh! Meanwhile, his eyes met with Mok Jiangun's through the ashes of the annihilated clones. The look in his eyes as he gazed at him wasn't that of facing a strong opponent. It was the look of an absolute being gazing at him. Use them all you want. It will all be futile struggling. For a moment, Mok Jiangun's words flashed through his mind. He had casually dismissed those words that suggested he could handle him regardless of becoming human or losing his divine artifacts. But those words of his were sincere. Gur. Recalling this, he was suddenly gripped by anger. Do you really believe you can do anything to me with that insignificant human body? If so, I'll call it arrogance. I thought I wouldn't need to use my full strength to kill you who has become human, but I've changed my mind. I'll annihilate everything gathered here, including you. Whoosh. The silver crown on the Golden Heavenly King's head emitted a white light. Woong 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 woong. Then numerous light spheres the size of fists appeared from all directions and flew towards Mok Jiangun simultaneously. Bam 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 bam. In that state, the golden heavenly king tightly clenched his left hand. Then the ring on his finger began to emit an intense radiance, and soon the space between the split dark clouds began to ripple. This wasn't due to gravity. Crack, 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 crack. With a strange sound that shook the eardrums, the sky truly split open, revealing a world as black as the night sky. Countless stars were twinkling in the black world. Go. As the golden heavenly king moved his left hand in that state, the black world moved and began to focus somewhere as if expanding, and something was visible there. What is that? Could it be? Everyone watching was in an uproar at the sight of numerous huge gray boulders visible in the split black world. What on earth were those? Could those be star fragments? Amidst the murmuring sounds and the emotions of fear and terror rising here and there, the golden heavenly king raised the sword of Aiden with a chilling smile full of madness. As radiance flowed from the sword and the power of gravity arose. Go. The huge gray boulders visible between the split stars began to move towards this place. The approaching boulders were glowing red-hot and heat could be felt. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The ground shook as if an earthquake had occurred due to the tremendous pressure, and the earth was being crushed. The golden heavenly king shouted with maniacal laughter. This is the power of a god. With this slash. It was at that very moment. A black line appeared between the spheres of light. As a sharp sensation arrived from something crossing space, a red line appeared on the right arm of the golden heavenly king holding the sword of Aiden. What is this? Swoosh. Then as the radiance flowing from his sword disappeared, his arm fell off. Chapter 494, Final Chapter 1. A single black line appeared between the spheres of light that were continuously being created, rushing in and exploding. A sharp blade crossed space, and in an instant, the right arm of the golden heavenly king holding the sword of Aiden was cut off. Swoosh. The golden heavenly king's eyes widened, not having realized what had happened until his arm was severed. What on earth had just occurred? The sharp energy didn't fly through cutting the spheres of light, but crossed space directly. Because of this, he only belatedly realized he had been cut. Kook. The golden heavenly king's brow furrowed at the tremendous pain that came. Even so, he didn't let out a scream. Having lived for an unimaginably long time that humans couldn't even imagine, and having gone through countless wars, he could endure this level of pain. However, I need to retrieve the sword. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Thanks to losing his arm, he had dropped the sword and the gravity field was deactivated. Because of this, even his attempt to open space and pull in meteorites was halted. He needed to retrieve the sword again and put it back into orbit. The golden heavenly king tried to raise his divine power to pull back his severed arm and the sword. It was at that very moment. Crack, 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 crack. As the spheres of light bounced in all directions, someone burst out from between them. It was Mok Jaeyoung. You bastard. The golden heavenly king tried to create more spheres of light to prevent Mok Jaeyoung from approaching. But at that moment, whoosh, formless swords appeared around Mok Jaeyoung, rotating fiercely and deflecting the incoming spheres of light, preventing them from approaching. Panicked by Mok Jaeyoung's approach, the golden heavenly king, unable to control his divine power, tried to move himself to retrieve the sword. As they entered the realm of ultra-high speed, their movements slowed down infinitely. Just as the golden heavenly king's hand was about to touch the sword. At that very moment, oh no! A red line appeared on his outstretched left arm due to the sharp blade crossing space. As the sensation in his left hand disappeared, the light from the ring he was wearing quickly faded. Then, rumble, 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 rumble. The space that had opened high in the sky closed in on itself and shut completely. Along with this, the heat and pressure that had been crushing the earth disappeared, and those who had been pressed down by it looked up at the closed sky and cheered. Wah! They had been dumbfounded by the falling stars. However, when Mok Jaeyoung prevented it, regardless of whether they were righteous or evil, they couldn't help but shout with joy. Mok Jaeyoung, you really? Mu Yutian too couldn't contain his excitement as he watched this scene with a trembling heart. In the past, regardless of how it happened, he had thought his half-brother had entered the heaven and earth society and abandoned righteousness, treading the path of evil. But all of that was meaningless now. Before his eyes now stood the world's greatest master and an unparalleled hero. Heavenly Demon! Heavenly Demon! Heavenly Demon! Everyone called out to him with reverence. Only he could kill this transcendent being who called himself a god. That's why they became one in their wish. As if hearing their wish, Mok Jaungun's form rushed towards the golden heavenly king, who was trying to create distance by flapping his wings, flustered after losing even his left arm. How can this be? The golden heavenly king found it hard to bear, not from pain but from humiliation. If it had been before he lost his core, it would have been slightly less shameful as it was done by the absolute being who had been opposing him for ages. But now it was completely different. He had lost his core and completely lost his power as the Demon King, and even had his divine artifacts stolen by a subordinate at his side, falling to the human realm and becoming human. How dare a mere human? How dare he push me this far? He couldn't bring himself to accept this. Gur. Therefore he finally had to make the choice he had been avoiding the most. Thump. He had thought he could easily kill him with just the power of his divine artifacts, but that wasn't the case. 100 years ago, when his core was damaged by him, he had entered a recovery period after suffering critical damage, but only 30% had been restored. That's why he had to avoid drawing out the divine power of his core as much as possible, but now he had no choice. Pop 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 pop. Cough. As he drew out the divine power of his unrecovered core, blood spurted from his mouth. However, as his core moved for the first time in 100 years, divine power circulated throughout his body, and tremendous power surged. Swoosh. Swoosh. The circulation of divine power instantly restored his severed left and right arms. As his arms regenerated, the golden heavenly king stopped fleeing and flew towards the rushing Mok Jaungun. If he had to go through a long recovery process again, he might have to give up his position to someone else, but he was determined to kill him here and now. ///////. At that moment, numerous trajectories of black lines embroidered a magnificent pattern in the air. Shudder. The golden heavenly king's pupils shook frantically. He couldn't see the trajectories of the sword this guy was drawing. His eyes were filled only with lines cutting through the air, and he had no way to deal with it. Whoosh. The golden heavenly king hurriedly wrapped himself with his large golden wings. These wings were the crystallization of divine power along with his core. When concentrating divine power, these golden wings boasted a hardness far superior to even the armor of Aiden. But / as countless nerves connected to each wing were all cut. Whoosh. Feathers split into thousands of pieces scattered in all directions. In thousands of years of war he might have suffered small wounds, but he had never lost his wings. But now those proud golden wings he boasted of were being destroyed. This. Unlike his physical body, this couldn't be restored in a short time. But it didn't end there. Mok Jaungun's evil commandment sword stained black, cut off his right arm, and simultaneously his left fist was planted in his abdomen. Thud. Penetrating force coming through the fist. At this energy, the golden heavenly king, who had been enduring the pain until now, opened his mouth. Kook. Not stopping there, Mok Jaungun's elbow struck his chin upwards. Crack. Kook. With the sound of his jaw breaking, his head shot upwards. It's far from over. Flinch. At Mok Jaungun's voice ringing in his ears, the golden heavenly king's face turned pale. He didn't know exactly what he had done, but the fierce and sharp energies coming through each of his strikes were tearing his insides apart, giving him pain he had never experienced before. No. Go. The golden heavenly king raised divine power in his left hand, trying to create a whirlwind of light to deflect Mok Jaungun. However, the left arm he extended was cut off just like that. Park. Mok Jaungun grabbed the cheeks of his face as he let out a scream of pain. Grab. You'll need to stay conscious until I chew and eat every bit of your flesh, bone fragments, and every point of your internal organs. You. At those words, the golden heavenly king felt a chill down his spine. No, his entire body trembled with goosebumps. This guy was different from the demon king he had known. Gone was the figure full of dignity despite being of the demon clan, replaced by someone unspeakably cruel and vicious. Shall we start with those eyes first? Mok Jaungun reached out his fingers towards his two eyes with an incredibly chilling smile. But it was at that moment. It would be best to stop there, incarnation. Mok Jaungun's hand stopped midway at the will echoing in his mind. As it wasn't transmitted from very far away, Mok Jaungun could immediately pinpoint where it came from. It was in the direction of the 10,000 Great Mountains. Mok Jayongun slowly turned his head. As he turned his head, Mok Jayongun's two pupils shook. Above the 10,000 Great Mountains, the figure of someone with a face full of scars was visible, and he could immediately recognize who it was by the third eye on his forehead. It was Mok Gon. Did he change bodies? Mok Jayongun had thought that Mok Gon, who had been forcibly expelled from the Great Strength King, would have been blown apart by the gravity field created by the Golden Heavenly King. Despite his numerous evil deeds and madness, did he possess some kind of heavenly luck? He truly had a tenacious life. Grip. Strength entered Mok Jayongun's hand holding the evil sword, Evil Commandment Sword. This was because of the two beings held in both hands of Mok Gon, who had a face full of scars. In his left hand was Chong Ryong, who had become faint after exhausting most of her spirit power, and in his right hand was Wai So-yun, who seemed to have lost consciousness and was hanging limply. Finally, both Wai So-yun, the soul, and Chong Ryong, the spirit, had fallen into his hands. Gur. Killing intent rose fiercely in Mok Jayongun's eyes. He wanted to cut off his neck right away, but the distance was too far. It was a distance that his mind sword couldn't reach and was difficult even for the bullet sword force, probably a result of careful calculation. Mok Jayongun's prediction was accurate. Kuhahihi. Mok Gon, bursting into laughter filled with madness, couldn't hide his excitement. He thought everything had come to naught due to numerous variables, but in the end they had fallen into his hands. Then a voice echoed in his mind. Well done. Half of the main body is down there. Shut up. From now on I'll handle this myself. You just need to follow my will. Do as you please. Your judgment has surpassed mine. The yielding will was Mok Gon's and the strongly rejecting will was Bai Yonghian's. Bai Yonghian's will wasn't interested in things like the annihilation of the Central Plains martial world or the exclusion of humans for the sake of the Heavenly Clan, and had only been waiting for this moment. Mok Gon, no. Bai Yonghian looked at Chong Ryong with a smile tinged with madness and said, now we can go back to how it was before. So Wool. Before? Chong Ryong had no more words for his madness and obsession. He was just sorry to one person. Mortal. Chong Ryong looked at Mok Jayongun and shook her head. She hoped he wouldn't make a foolish choice because of her alone. Please don't do that. If he did, she wouldn't be able to bear it even until the moment of her annihilation. She firmly resolved in her heart. Although her spirit power was almost exhausted and she was at a stage where she could barely move, she planned to seize the one chance. Swoosh. Chong Ryong looked at Wai So-yun, who could be called the body containing her soul. Bai Yonghian would surely try to use the forbidden technique to make her and Wai So-yun's body one. She planned to aim for that moment and perish together with her soul. I will absolutely not hold you back. Although you will be sad, if I can save you, I can vanish with a glad heart. As expected, Bai Yonghian began to chant some kind of spell. It was clearly the forbidden technique of the wicked granny that dealt with souls and spirits. It seemed he was trying to merge the soul and spirit into one right away to achieve his goal. Swoosh. Bai Yonghian brought himself close to Wai So-yun's body. Chong Ryong waited with tense eyes. Just once. She had to aim for the moment when she came into contact with the soul. But then Bai Yonghian, who had been chanting the spell, stopped his spirit body right in front of Wai So-yun and said something that surprised her. I won't let him take you away 3 times. Chong Ryong's two pupils shook. 3 times? Could it be? Her eyes turned to Mok Jayongun, who was not taking his eyes off her from afar. Then, whoosh. Spell power burrowed into the back of her spirit body's neck, and soon completely stiffened her spirit body. To the surprised Chong Ryong, Bai Yonghian grinned and said, if you were planning to do something, forget it. I've been waiting for this moment alone for 100 years. Do you think I'd let my guard down so easily? With those words, Bai Yonghian began to chant the spell again and tried to insert Chong Ryong's immobilized spirit body into Wai So-yun's body. Swoosh. Chong Ryong's eyes reddened. She had just realized something, but she couldn't forget everything like this. However, her spirit body was already slowly seeping into Wai So-yun's body. Bai Yonghian smiled meaningfully as if he had won. But suddenly Bai Yonghian's expression contorted. What is this? Stab. At that moment, Wai So-yun's eyes flew open, and she tried to stab something into Bai Yonghian's heart. Bam. Because of this, Bai Yonghian let go of Chong Ryong and hurriedly grabbed Wei Soyun's dagger. Then he shouted in an angry voice. How dare a mere vengeful spirit be inside this body? You should have checked, shouldn't you? What? Grab. Wei Soyun no guard Go Chan, who had entered her body, used all his strength to try and stab the dagger into Bai Yonghian's chest, but it was useless. From the start, the difference in power was too great. Enraged at being interrupted for a moment, Bai Yonghian, clang, instantly broke the dagger, then placed his hand on Wei Soyun's chest and chanted the demon resistance technique. Then, whoosh, Go Chan's vengeful spirit in Wei Soyun's body was forcibly ejected. Ugh. For a moment, Bai Yonghian, who was about to annihilate Go Chan's vengeful spirit out of anger, seemed to realize something and remembered he had dropped Chong Ryong's spirit body, so he reached his hand downwards. It was at that very moment. Slash. His arm was cut off and someone soared upwards. It was Mok Jiangen. Not missing the small gap created by his spirit servant and vengeful spirit guard Go Chan, Mok Jiangen, who had flown here in an instant, caught the falling Chong Ryong. Chong Ryong spoke in a trembling voice to Mok Jiangen, who was holding her and soaring upwards. Mortal, no you. Before she could finish her words, Mok Jiangen gently caressed her cheek and spoke. It was all me. At those words, tears poured from Chong Ryong's reddened eyes. Chapter 495, Final Chapter. 2. It was all me. The flowing tears cannot be contained. Sob. Swoosh. Woong 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 woong. Countless memories flooded in through Mok Jiangen's palm, touching Chong Ryong's cheek. Her red eyes, shedding tears, wavered. Memories were being painted before her eyes. Dash. Why do you entrust this to me, a mere human vessel? It's not mere. Isn't it shining even more brightly? Someone once said it shines brighter because it's short. We can live like that too, can't we? Her brightly smiling face. That was my everything. Born as the Demon King, virtually immortal, I longed for a human life that was fleeting yet shone brighter than anyone else's. Swish 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 swish. The black flame was gradually getting smaller. It was dying out. It truly was long and arduous. Stop. There's no need to completely dissolve your will into me like this. No, why are you trying to disappear? I'm not disappearing. There's no need to think like that. You're me. In the end, we are one. As the black flame reduced to the size of a finger, even the voice was gradually becoming fainter. Stop. Stop it. Didn't you want to meet her? Didn't you want to speak to her every moment you awoke? I could understand because all the memories had been assimilated. In those few moments of awakening, he repeated the same words dozens, hundreds, thousands of times in his mind. I missed you so much. My one and only bride. Yet he never uttered these words aloud. I knew well why he did this. It was to leave no lingering attachment. If even a hair's breadth of attachment remained, he might want to give up on assimilating with me, the human vessel. The beautiful and shining story of So-woo and me ended then. Now, it's the story of Chong Ryong and you. The dying ember. In the ember he depicted his meeting with her in a flash. And he recalled his bride who was so beautiful for the last time. She was beautiful. So beautiful like a single red peony. Whoosh. The ember thus extinguished and scattered like a heat haze. As the memories contained in the thoughts were engraved as if unfolding before her eyes, Chong Ryong shed tears even more sorrowfully. I knew. You knew. 100 years ago, after breathing her last, she became a vengeful spirit, fixated only on revenge. To her, who was desolate and filled only with darkness, mortal started as someone in a similar position of shared suffering, but before she knew it, he became a ray of light and gradually she came to hold him in her heart. She thought she would never hold anyone in her heart again. But she couldn't hide that emotion. That's why you became mortal as a human, not your former self. Yes. We'll be together. Even if it's just for a fleeting moment. Now I think I understand why he said such words. He truly regretted it. All those moments. The shining story of So-woo and me has come to an end. Yet you left without leaving even a trace of lingering attachment, holding in your heart the brief but beautiful sparkle of our time together. No, you became one with him. His voice from that time faintly echoes in my ears. I missed you so much. My one and only bride. Chong Ryong wailed sorrowfully and tightly embraced Mok Jae-eun. I missed you so much. Just once. Even if it's just for a moment, I thought I'd be willing to disappear forever if I could see you just once. Grip. She embraced him tightly as if he might disappear somewhere. But at some point, swish 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 swish. Her spirit body tried to pass through Mok Jae-eun's body. Mok Jae-eun's pupils shook. Although her spirit body had become faint due to the depletion of spirit power, he thought there was still some left, but her spirit power was rapidly being exhausted. Chong Ryong. Creep creep. He could feel spell power. Then Mok Jae-eun's eyes caught sight of Mok Gon, no by Yonghyun forming a hand seal with one hand. The surrounding area for dozens of jang was filled with his spell power. My master. Guard Go Chan, who had tried to move Wai Soyun's body, which was the soul, groaned in pain as his spirit body became faint. The spirit power of the vengeful spirits was being rapidly depleted due to the wall created by spell power. Whoosh. Intense light flowed from Mok Jae-eun's eyes. At that moment, Bai Yonghyun's face, who was chanting a spell while forming a hand seal, contorted in pain and fresh blood spurted from his mouth. Ooh. This was because he had been struck in the heart by the Mind Sword, the Sword Intent. Mok Jae-eun's Mind Sword, having regained his original memories and become stronger in will than anyone else, was incomparably stronger than before. However, cough cough. He endured the pain of his heart being torn apart and continued to chant the spell. Bai Yonghyun's face was contorted with pain, but his eyes were filled with anger and madness. Swish 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 swish. Chong Ryong. It was useless to try to hold her with spell power. Chong Ryong's body, which had become faint to the point of disappearing completely, passed through Mok Jae-eun's arms and fell downwards. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Soldier. Fight. Split. Formation. As Mok Jae-eun chanted the spell along with the hand seals of the 9-word revival technique, 4 pillars appeared around the falling Chong Ryong, creating surfaces that contained her. This was the 4 peaks linking technique. Gur. Whoosh. Mok Jae-eun's form reached in front of Bai Yonghyun in the blink of an eye. Nevertheless, Bai Yonghyun continued to chant the spell without even thinking of blocking or avoiding. His eyes, filled with madness, were saying, if I can't have her, I won't let anyone else have her either. Even if that meant Chong Ryong's eternal annihilation. Whoosh. Tedder. In response to his unceasing madness, Mok Jae-eun split Bai Yonghyun's body in half with a single stroke filled with tremendous killing intent. Slash. Crack. Only when he was cut in half did Bai Yonghyun's mouth stop uttering spells. Slash 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 slash. As if this wasn't enough, Mok Jae-eun instantly created hundreds of trajectories, annihilating Bai Yonghyun's body without leaving a single piece. Still not satisfied, Mok Jae-eun was about to fly towards the falling Chong Ryong. But then, swish 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 swish. Something faint was visible in the blood scattering like dust. It was a vengeful spirit. As Bai Yonghyun, his face still full of scars, appeared as a vengeful spirit, Mok Jae-eun grabbed the neck of his spirit as if pleased. Grab. He had decided to annihilate even his soul, preventing him from entering the cycle of reincarnation. Then, as if trying to resist, the vengeful spirit Bai Yonghyun reached out his hand towards Mok Jae-eun's face. To this, disappear. Whoosh. Bai Yonghyun's spirit body began to scatter due to demonic energy and spell power. But the expression of Bai Yonghyun, who had just reached out his hand towards him with an angry face, was different from before. It was a face as if he had let go of everything. At that moment, Bai Yonghyun's unconscious thoughts flowed in through his spirit body. Slash. Slash. Stop. Please, stop. Bai Yonghyun was suffering as he created self-inflicted wounds, cutting his own face with a dagger. He was trying to stab the eye on his forehead with the dagger, but having lost control of his body, he ended up cutting his face. Please. Please. The incoming thoughts of that guy. They were miserable memories of trying to take his own life or trying to remove that guy whenever he briefly escaped Mok Gon's control over the past 100 years. He constantly fought between the inherent madness and reason within himself. However, all those results were nothing but the encroachment of madness. Swish 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 swish. Having read these thoughts, Mok Jae-eun's eyes became strange. So you too were unable to escape from madness due to Mok Gon's control. But the reason he pretended to attack him without any explanation even after escaping that control when he became a vengeful spirit was, I must be annihilated. I must disappear as evil until the very end. His thoughts wished for his own annihilation. It was because only by disappearing as the root of evil until the end could he completely wash away her resentment. Swish 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 swish. As if knowing that Mok Jung-un had read his thoughts, the scattering and disappearing vengeful spirit by Yong-hyun shook his head with a subtle look. It seemed as if he was asking not to tell her anything. And so, the vengeful spirit by Yong-hyun completely scattered and even his spirit body was annihilated. Even if he tried to do something for her at the very end, Mok Jung-un felt no sympathy for him. After all that madness had originated from him. Whoosh. Mok Jung-un moved the four peaks linking technique to the ground, dispelled it and then checked on Chong Ryong. Having become completely faint and on the verge of disappearing, she spoke with difficulty. By Yong-hyun? He. At her question, Mok Jung-un was about to say that he had annihilated him but then hesitated. Her spirit body was already on the verge of disappearing. If he were to inform her of the annihilation of Bai Yong-hyun, who could be considered the subject of her resentment, what would happen? If she were to attain enlightenment like this, the worst situation could occur. Why So-yun, who could be considered her soul, had already escaped even the cycle of reincarnation, so she could be annihilated just like that. What should I do? He who had been unhindered in everything at this moment, couldn't decide anything. She had already exhausted most of her spirit power and was on the verge of disappearing. He couldn't take risks in this state. Master. At that moment, guard Go Chan, who had protected Wai So-yun's body until the end despite facing the crisis of his spirit body being annihilated, approached. Seeing Wai So-yun being carried on Go Chan's back, Mok Jung-un's eyes wavered even more. It was because he recalled the conversation he had with wicked Granny Cheol-surian when he obtained the forbidden technique that could unite soul and spirit. Is it possible to make the spirit the main subject and unite it with the soul using the forbidden technique? The spirit as the main subject? Do you think that's possible? The spirit is like a strong thought from one's lifetime. It scatters and is washed away on earth when the soul goes through the process of reincarnation. In the end, the soul becomes the subject of reincarnation. Then what happens when the soul and spirit become one? Is everything related to the spirit completely washed away? Yes. That's the principle. Grip. Strength entered Mok Jung-un's clenched fist. Drip. His nails dug into his flesh and blood flowed. At the end of their journey they had come to know each other's existence, so why did it have to end like this? It would be right to unite her soul and spirit to allow her to live, but if that happens due to the cycle of reincarnation, everything of Chong Ryong the spirit would be washed away. She would no longer be Chong Ryong he knew, but her previous life. Swoosh. At that moment, despite being unable to make contact due to her faint spirit body, Chong Ryong reached out her hand towards Mok Jung-un's clenched fist. With a look as if she knew everything, she moved her lips, saying it was all right and smiled with tears in her eyes.